Down your level of creating, and how does that work for you in the formulaic way? And what do you have to say about most of what King is talking about relative to the fact of you being in the generation that really is really the recipients of a lot of the now popular music that is trash, right? So how do you look at that from the standpoint of what you're doing, and how do you feel yourself being able to feel it?
Yeah, it's been a journey, you know, and I guess to sum it up, it's been like a filling out process.
Right.
You know, I started out like it's just something innate in me. Like I've always been connected to like the original element. So.
You say innate because you started out when you were 8, that's why.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, the truth be told, you were rapping since you were about 8 years old, right?
Yes, sir. I actually wrote my first song when I was 7.
Uh-huh.
And then I did my first performance when I was 8. And I dropped my first project when I was 13.
What motivated that? How did you, at that age, determine if you were going to do music or be a lyricist?
What it was the influence. It wasn't necessarily so much as like people around me that was doing it. You know, when I got into it, like I really didn't know much about rap, you know, at first, but I knew I had this thing with like dancing and performing, like since I was 4. And then the older I got, obviously being from Bainbridge, Georgia, being from, you know, down south, the initial thing was like a down south type of, you know, trap, like T.I. trap music was big, Grand Hustle was big at that time period, so that's what I was into. Like T.I. was my first rapper that I looked at. I was like, okay, like it was something about his charisma though, you know, it was just something more so about his charisma and how he came off. You know, Grand Hustle, like even hearing stuff like that, like being grand and having hustle, like stuff like that always connected to me. But then when I came up from where I'm from Bainbridge, and I came up here to Atlantis, and the thick of it, I started hearing about like real hip hop. You know, so I started learning about like KRS-One, Rakim, Campus, Nas, and that was the thing with me. Like when I heard about them dudes, I didn't even want to listen to Tupac and Biggie.
Really?
I wasn't into them at first because I thought everybody else was better. But the reason I thought everybody else was better was because of how my mindset, I got introduced to hip hop through lyricism. So lyricism was the only thing that mattered to me. Like, it was like if you didn't have hard bars, if it wasn't like thought provoking, I ain't even wanna, cause KRS-One and how Rakim and them, and then how intricate they flow patterns and all of that stuff was, like, that was all I cared about. You know, okay, I wanted to learn more vocabulary, I wanna know more big words, I wanna know more syllables. You know, so like that was my thing, cause I always had a thing for like literature and writing, and, you know, the arts. And yeah, so it was like Rakim, Cannabis, KRS-One, Nas. But the interesting thing about it was I was influenced by LL Cool J as well, even in an era where it was like a LL influence was kind of like obsolete. But again, it was something about like a charisma and an energy. So it was always something that I resonated with watching these guys, you know, that was doing the hip hop, respecting the elements and things of that nature. It was something about their energy that resonated with me. So it made me want to take it serious. And then, with it already being in the family, you know, like the older I get, the more I figure out, like, okay, you got, you know, like King was DJing, you know, doing performances, shows, and then like me and my dad would freestyle, you know, and then my mom's a singer, and my grandma, she's in the choir and gospel, and all of that stuff. So it was like music was just so everywhere around me. I saw music like a religion young. You know, it was like I felt like that's what I belonged to out of anything. So that was how I got into, you know, rhyming.
Okay, but also would you say that a lot of what you was rhyming to or creating or currying was based on your experience that you were having, that you were seeing around you, and your family life or the community, as it were? A lot of that influenced a lot of what you were speaking to, right?
More so like a different world. Like that's how it was. I saw it. Because nobody in my age group, nobody in my generation was listening to what I was listening to. They hadn't heard of the artists I had heard of.
So none of your generational peers?
Nah, like I was in a time capsule.
Is that right?
You know, so whereas
but
everybody...
Did you know that initially or right away?
I didn't know that. Well, I did because I knew what everybody was listening to. I know what's on the radio.
But it wasn't. You wasn't thinking about that. You wasn't doing
Nah, that was the thing. It was like it's always been something about being smarter that intrigued me. Like I just want to be smart. You know, I just want to know. Like it was just always something like that. So everybody wanting to stay kind of like in an elementary mindset ain't never really intrigued me. Like if y'all in my age range and this is where y'all mindset at, then I'm in the wrong place. So after that, I started like I was a sophomore taking senior classes in high school because that's just how my mindset always was. Like I ain't really feel like I belonged with a lot of people in my age range, but noticing that was in the disconnect. Like the topics that we like the topics of discussion that you have from peer to peer. That was when I noticed I'm like, I'm different. The stuff that I thought was funny, you know, because like I said, me being in the hip hop, it was a culture. So like it wasn't just hip hop, it wasn't just music, but it was even stuff like Bruce Lee, you know, it was even stuff like Eddie Murphy movies, like, and nobody my age was on none of that, you know. So that was the thing that was like, I just noticed it was different because nobody was vibrating on the frequency I was.
But you also were winning rap battles.
Yeah.
At a young age.
Mm-hmm.
And up against what? Up against who?
Grown men. Like I would be like 13 and dudes could be 20 anywhere. You know, it never mattered to age, honestly, like to me.
But what did you find yourself really competing, or you just doing what you do and you were just spitting the words or spitting the rhymes and you were doing that what came natural to you in a sense? You said it's innate, right?
Yeah, in essence, that's interesting you say that because that's what it was. It wasn't really a competition thing for me at first because I was just sharpening like every moment to freestyle. Every time, even if I went against somebody, I was like, okay, they talking like, oh, he can spit or whatever. Like I was up for the challenge because I just knew it would make me better. Like,
you had what they call the confidence, right?
Yes, sir.
You were you had a sense of self. You know what I'm saying? And usually, I was talking about the fact when we talk about New York, and a lot of times, you know, we was giving knowledge and stuff, and then you have, you know, groups like PE and, you know, those different types of ways that things have been divided as groups, you know. And you say you wasn't influenced by that. You wasn't influenced by PE either, right? That wasn't a part of what you were.
Public Enemy?
Yeah, Public Enemy.
Yeah, I was influenced by anything that was like considered to be authentic hip hop.
Okay.
Anything that was considered to be hip hop, I was influenced by. I didn't care who it was. I didn't care if it was the Grave Diggers. I didn't care if it was Brand Nubian. I didn't care if it was Grand Poobah. And that's the thing, I had already knew I was different because like I said, like, it don't even matter if you was somebody that was born, I was born in 1999. So it don't even matter if it was people that was born in the 80s or the 70s, like, they wasn't even, where I'm from, they wasn't even hip to the people I was listening to, like.
But that's interesting because you come from the South, you're saying, you know, Bainbridge was where you was born, right, raised. But then the South also produced the Dungeon family,
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
You know, so how do you relate to that, you know, in terms of what they were providing for them?
Yeah, in terms of people from the South that let me know like it's something, we different, it was like 3 dudes. Like I said, the first one was T.I. I don't know what it was about T.I. It was just something about how he was when I first saw him, like his image, you know, the everything, like, and then it was Outkast or Andre 3000 more specifically. And then after that, it was King El Rey.
So, King El Rey was right there in your immediate circumference, right?
Exactly.
You say he was also rapping, or he was mixing, or he was scratching,
right?
You know, at that time. Did you find that what he was providing was something unique and distinct as well, or did you just?
That's the thing off top.
Yeah.
First time I heard a King El Rey record, I was what? 13.
Right.
That was the first time. This is on. So that's the first time I heard a King El Rey record. And when I did, I had never heard nothing like it in my life. I already knew. I was like, what? You know, like, what is this? This ain't my uncle. Ain't no way nobody like, cause I mean,
You got too close.
exactly. I'm like, what? You know, and then I'm like, why is this not all I'm hearing about? You know, that was my initial thing. I already knew it was something different. And I knew it was something I had a connection to too, but I had to catch up to it the older I got.
So you're recording now, and not most of, well, your recordings are now based in the cadence and of course, you know, the energy and vibration of what King provided. To the degree that some will even mistake you for him or him for you, or I don't know how that works. You know, obviously he's an elder, so it would be, but there's something that's so similar and so symbiotic about that allows for you to be able to provide the cadence and of course the lyrics and the beats. But in this new album, because I mean, one that we speak to specifically is the one that you did with your closure. You're part of that, and you theatrically put yourself into that and provided a sense of the realness, you know, of that.
Yes, sir.
How does that work for you in terms of being so up close and personal to the creativity that King provides?
It's not. I mean, it's not really a hard thing to deal with at all because it's not. It's not a pressure because my mindset has always been like just continue to get better, sharpen. You know, so it's always been that. But it's like a lot more admirable and it's actually more soothing and comfortable because, like I said, like feeling like you the only one. You know, that got this type of otherworldly type of, like you got this otherworldly type of connection to something.
Right.
And then to find somebody else, you know, that not even really find somebody else, but them find you and really y'all been, like, y'all are of each other. You know what I'm saying?
So the nurturing and cultivating, so I want to maybe come out to paint a little bit. Because I want to later on we talk more about, you know, some of the things that you have created and put out there that has taken, of course, you know, the international arena by storm. But King, obviously, you know, you hear what the president speaking to and how the cultivating and nurturing of youth starts, you know, at home, right? And it seems like, you know, you really truly had a. When did you realize that Prince had it in him? You know, did you take the time to, oh man, I gotta nurture and cultivate this, or were you just being yourself?
Well, it started, you know, when we initially connect, because they used to always say that he was like me. You know, I was real active. You know, I was rapping and all of that when I was young, but I was involved in everything. And they were saying that it was almost like he was my son, you know, because he was so much like me. And they didn't know anybody else that was that much like me.
Because you grew up where? Where were you first living in Water at? What city or state?
In Seminole.
Seminole, Georgia?
Yep, right. It's exactly 22 miles from where he was born. So, the Seminole, like I said, I played football for the Seminole Indians, and you know, we was on indigenous stuff, and where I was, and I roamed throughout Georgia, Florida, and Alabama. So I spent a lot of time in Alabama. I spent a lot of time in Florida. You know, in particular, like Daytona, Orlando, Florida, Tampa, and those places. Had family out in Orlando. I spent the most time in Orlando, you know, in Winter Garden near Disney World. But I was always just connected to the diversity from Alabama, the people in Alabama, how they were versus the people in Florida and the people here in Georgia. You know, so coming up here in Atlanta and just seeing the diversity. You know, so I was kind of like in the thick of it and seeing the energy of the different people and seeing how they related to music. You know, it was a lot of diversity in different locations because I traveled a lot and I was performing a lot. You know, with my uncle. My uncle, he was actually my DJ. He got me into rock.
What was the name?
We call him Rich Dog. Rich Dog. He was. We had a group. We formed a group years ago. It was called the Lords of the Cypher. We had a group, and we used to travel. I used to be real connected to my family. Like I used to be with my uncles and stuff all the time. I was very active, and it was interesting because they was pretty much following what I was doing. You know, I mean, I just stayed active a lot, and we traveled. We used to perform all the time. You know, one of my uncles, we call him E. Brown, but his name is Elijah, and he got me heavy into weightlifting. You know, so I was heavy into weightlifting with him, and we were the strongest people. You know, I was the strongest person at my school. I was the fastest person at my school and the smartest person at my school. And I was rapping and everything else, and and traveling with them on school nights. We going to the strip clubs. I wasn't even old enough to be in there. I'm going to the strip clubs. I'm in there performing, like in the strip club, like I'm grown. You know,
You got your initiation early, right?
Yeah.
Well, but I think it's important. I mean, a lot of times we're having these kind of in-depth conversations and also make it intimate to the degree that you can really trace some of the synchronicities or serendipitous way of your life, you know, because Seminole, you know, Indians, you played for them, you know, and then did you have a sense of, and I want to ask this question so it can be prefaced in a way that you can be able to answer it, because I want to let people know that you talk about your indigenous relationship to the natives of that time in Florida, Alabama, all this. But the conversation that we've been having and what we've been taught, or the narrative that we've been taught or given, is that that's not where it began for us. You know, we came from somewhere else. You know that story. And we came, you know, and we were kidnapped and captured and brought here, you know, as servants and slaves, or you know, from those who went and got us, and now we have find ourselves in another place, or in this place, or in a space that we have no real familiarity to. But you were able to, when did you first find out that you had some connection to the indigenous and that your family was native? You know, they call it Indian, but that's another part of the indigenous, or India as being the first black, you know, whatever the case may be. How did you get that connection and feel that connection was so important to you, to the degree now that you proclaim it loud and clear, that this is who I am and this is my ancestry?
Yeah, it started with my grandfather. You know, my grandfather, I used to stay with my grandfather a lot. My grandfather and my grandmother. And my grandfather used to tell me the stories all the time about us being Indians. He said we was black Seminoles, you know, and I never fell for the African narrative. So ever since he had told me that when I was in school, I was very young in school, and he told me that we was black Seminoles. So I started to research the black Seminoles, and I started to see the roots from where I was from, Seminole County, Georgia, and then Seminole County, the Florida State Seminoles, and I was tracing everything, and all the way back to Seminole County, Oklahoma. So I was seeing that we were actually indigenous black people that was here in America, and I ain't traced nobody that was African in my family. So when he told me that we was black Seminoles, I started to really dig into the indigenous aspect of my life. I'm like, okay, well, let me start doing these checks. Let me find out what that is, what that means. And I was just seeing like all these records of us being resistant to white supremacy, us having these wars all throughout the 1800s. We having all of these wars and the Trail of Tears, and you know, we was on the Trail of Tears, and we was and we had the native chiefs that were teaching the Red Indians, and we was the chiefs above them, and you know, so when I started to see all that, all the false African narrative.
So it predates the Mahava or the course of land slave trade, I was just saying.
Yeah, I mean, well, if you, no, I'm not saying that part of it, but my lineage obviously does, but what I'm saying is, if you look at the 1800s, we were not slaves. Those were black natives that was on those Trail of Tears. So when you saw the black Seminoles, you saw the Cherokees, you saw the Creeks, you saw the Choctaws, and you saw the Chickasaws. Those were considered to be the 5 civilized tribes, but what everybody didn't know that they were black tribes. Those were black tribes in their original form. And they were the ones that was telling the Red Indians what to do. I had to find that because we were told that we were from Africa and we were slaves. But when I started to do the research, I see that these were all black natives. And then I started to find the families that started all of these different things. And then when I started to trace the lineage of all these people, the numbers was enormous. Like I'm seeing records of these people having history here that go back 20,000 years. And I'm like, okay, well, if they got history here with mound builders, and they got history being on this land for 20,000 years. How does the slave narrative fit into this? When we got records showing that these people were here. They got stuff that's way older than the pyramids in Egypt and all of that. So when I started to see this, I'm like, well, somebody lied to us about who we are and where we from.
And why would that lie be when it, again, popular narrative is that we all came from Africa. Everybody, all life started in Africa. What was the intention from your standpoint? And I think this also ties into why you rap the way you rap and the way you provide your lyrics. But how is it? What was the benefit of that lie or that misconception of who we are, or who all? Because it's not like none of us are from Africa, or none of those millions down around Africa. There are people from Africa too. I know you say that, but at the same time, you're talking about your specific lineage and what you know and found out about that period. Because I think one of the things we talked about is the Brown family seems to always trace back to something to that effect, the surname or the family name Brown, and Richardson, and then of course Freeman was used quite often. How does that factor into some of the evidentiary way of what you're presenting based on the facts that negate the African narrative?
Ask the question again. I'm just trying to follow. What is it that you're specifically trying to?
Nice long question.
I
gotta learn to put the question mark in there before I can go ahead. But no, I'm saying, when you talk about the narrative relative to the African, how did that begin? Where did that come from? Why was it important?
Well,
what was the intention?
I got you now. Yeah, the African narrative. Well, it was all based upon a plan of white supremacy. That's why they started it. And I tell people where these narratives started. Okay. And I used to give a layout of all these different people. You had a lot of people that wanted to be able to dominate and control America. So what people are finding out that America is a lot older than what people want to believe. And black people been here a long time. Especially when you start to get into the Olmec presence. So when they start to get into that part of it, the whole African narrative, it gets really blurry, because when you go into these places, like areas out here, like if you go to Etowah, like if you go to Etowah Mountains, okay, you go to Etowah just north of here. All right, what you're gonna find is you're gonna find Olmec writings. You're gonna find all the stuff inside of these mountains. And you, like Etowah, it comes from the word Utla or Utila, like, and that means motherland. So if they was calling this the motherland, and you find the same thing in Central America, when you go to the pyramids in Central America, you see the same thing. You see Tula. So you got Itula here, which is Etowah, Itula here, and then you got Tula, T-U-L-A, in Central America, which means motherland. So if they saying that America is the motherland, and this was documented in ancient doctrines and tablets, who started saying that Africa is the motherland? And then when you start to look at all the culture, and you see that the stuff is older here than it is over there, somebody is messing with your mind. Like when you look at all the pyramids that's here, and they tell you where the Egyptian culture came from. Most people don't know that the Egyptian culture came from America, not the other way around. These are the things that's been documented. All the people, the Masons, the Shriners and the Masons, they've been doing this for a long time. But it's only coming out now that, okay, it's not we came from Africa, really Africa came from America. When you get into all this stuff in this, the well documented, all the pyramids, from the Pyramid of the Sun, the Pyramid of the Moon, and Teotihuacan, and the City of the Gods, and all of this stuff, you start to see that somebody painted a false narrative on where civilization started. Especially when you get into the Amazon out there in South America. You find all of these old kingdoms, palaces, and empires. Remember, think about it. The oldest kingdoms and empires. Let's deal with that. You know, Atlantis is one of them, correct? Is that in Africa?
Last I checked, it wasn't.
Atlantis is never been in Africa.
Right.
Okay, Wakanda is another one.
Right. Well, he said Wakanda's not in Africa. Wakanda's not in Africa. Wakanda, man. Wakanda, that's Africa, man. Wakanda's not in Africa.
Wakanda once again. Hey, Lemuria.
Right,
Is Lemuria in Africa?
Right.
No, Lemuria is not in Africa.
Right. Lemuria is in the southern, central South America. I mean, south and central
Just
America.
think about everything that you heard about.
Right.
When you think about, you say Atlantis.
Right.
You hear about Eridu. You hear about, you know what I'm saying? People just recently started hearing about, you know, Wakanda.
Right.
You know, you hear about Hyperborea.
Right.
You know, you hear about these kingdoms and these empires.
Right.
But what nobody is telling you that these kingdoms and empires are here in America. They were American empires. They were not African empires.
I think I've been a little facetious when I was talking about Wakanda not being Africa, because clearly when we talk about
everybody know that was created. They say Wakanda is a fictional place that was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby for the movie Black Panther. But if you do research on Wakanda, you're only going to find Wakanda here in America.
And give me examples of that location, geographically speaking. Where was Wakanda here in America?
In a number of places. Okay, you got Wakanda right now. If you look up Wakanda, you'll see Wakanda is in Kansas City, in Kansas. You know, you got Wakanda in Oregon. You got Wakanda, Portland, Oregon. You know, you got Wakanda in Wisconsin. You know, and you got the Black Panther mounds and everything out there in all those areas. Wakanda is in South America. You know, they call it Wakas. Like I said, you have the word Waka and Wakanda. Like Wakanda, great spirit.
Right.
You know, you had a princess named Princess Wakanda. Wakanda in Kansas. Like all these things been in America all this time. So when you see like Mu, they say the empires of Mu, that's America. When they say Lemuria, when they say Atlantis, when they say Eridu, when they say El Dorado, all of these places have been in America. None of this was Africa. Now, some of it begins to get to the point where it becomes a fantasy because it's so old.
It's so old, right. It's so dated, you know, that it gives a sense that there's no reference point.
Right, of how old it is.
Right.
And so when you dealing with that, you know that somebody have painted a false narrative telling you that you came from somewhere.
And you said that the key was based on white supremacy to establish the white supremacist notion. And that's
you had a white guy. His name is Franz Boas. Okay, and you had another guy named Melville Hershkovich. These were two white guys that was responsible for establishing white supremacy and selling the false narrative that we all came from Africa. If you look up those two guys, you see what their agenda was. You had a guy named Charles Darwin from the UK who was on the same narrative. Yeah, exactly. Like we came from Africa and apes and all of that. All of that stuff was established by white supremacists. And nobody wants to accept the fact that these people they had an agenda. They all had an agenda to change everything in America. That's how they stole America from the people. So when you look at society, you're saying all of this stuff is coming out.
Right.
But everybody acting so shocked and so surprised, and I'm like, well, nothing has changed. It's been the same the whole time.
And it's good to know, like I said, also you mentioned Black Panthers. There are no Black Panthers in Africa.
Exactly.
So
Panthers are only native to America.
And then you also have the jaguars. The jaguars.
That's where the panther came from.
Right.
Where they say Panthera Unca. You have Panthera Unca, and then you have Panthera Pardus. Okay, Panthera Unca. Panthera onca is the dominant gene of the jaguar, right? Okay, you have Panthera pardus, that's the strain of a leopard. Okay, according to the records and the tablets, Africans were spawned out of the melanin of black leopards. And according to the tablets, black people here in America were spawned out of the melanin of black jaguars.